This is the 2024 BMW M4, and this year it makes 20 more horsepower than last year's BMW M4. So, 20 more horsepower. Can I feel them? Well, at a total of 523 horsepower and 479 pound-feet of torque, no, I can't really feel the difference. In case you somehow missed the memo the last bunch of years, the M4 is really what used to be the M3 Coupe. The M3 now is the sedan series. It's a powerful and competent car, and in the case of these here competition models, which really are the bulk of what you're going to find in Canada now, it's got all-wheel drive too. Either way, it's quick, and it is enjoyable in a sense. I've got complicated feelings about this thing though. So today we're going to enjoy some twisty roads up in Northern Ontario and see if I can start to find a little more inspiration here in the M4 cab. Now, before you start worrying too much, they haven't totally ruined it. Yes, you can still force it rear drive only, and you can turn the traction off, and then you've got that abundant torque to make it go all silly. So, all-wheel drive, but you can still throw it rear drive. That's a good start. What about transmissions in this modern era? Well, you can still get a 6-speed stick in the coupe, although not here in the cab. The competition models, you should also note, are faster. Here, 3.7 seconds to 100 kilometers an hour. In the coupe, down to 3.5. That coupe, however, with the manual, actually posts less horsepower. That's 479 horse to this 523 now. That's still plenty, of course, but this ZF 8-speed that, yes, is kind of boring because it's in absolutely everything, can simply take power apparently more reliably. So, can still enjoy rear drive, can still get the proper trans. How about the steering? Well, this may be up 20 horsepower, so that part's fun, but the steering continues to suck. It's just soulless. This electric power steering rack just continues to be really one of the saddest in the market, and especially the enthusiast segment. Porsche has shown that electric power steering can be made to actually feel reasonably okay, but this still is not. It either overweights itself in sport mode, even though really going faster makes your steering lighter in a proper setup, or it's way too floaty and light and over-assisted in the comfort modes. And those comfort modes are actually the beginning of where I sort of take issue with this car. You see, this is set up as a Grand Tourer, and it does a nice job of that. It can go fast, and it's also very comfortable. With that being said, this whole week, I've found myself just driving it like a normal car. Oftentimes, when I have something special or aggressive, I find myself itching to get out on the road and spend more time on it. I'll go out for drives at 3 in the morning and just play around and screw up my sleep cycle for the next couple days because apparently I'm old now. But this just doesn't have me wanting to do that. Yes, it can go fast, but to walk up at it, to look at it, and to drive it in the default modes when you fire it up, it just sort of feels like a glorified M440i, and at that point, why not just save yourself close to 30K? Of course, the N58 in that can't hold a candle to the tuned S58 that's in these more aggressive M models. It is an impressive engine. It's a 3-liter straight 6, still very smooth. Twin turbocharging really makes the torque come in as you start to roll in. And depending on what settings you choose as well, even here in the automatic, it can feel somewhat exciting going through the gears. They've done that now classic trick where they pause ignition when you shift so that you get a lurch. It's dramatic, it's fun, your passengers will definitely enjoy it. If you know what's going on, it does take a little bit of the magic out, but such are the realities of suspension of disbelief. All that comfort isn't necessarily a bad thing, of course, because as a comfy tourer, this is just an easy way about. For being a high-strung M car, a car that can absolutely do some really gnarly stuff, driving it about in my regular day-to-day stuff this week, it's been totally inoffensive. Yes, it's a little firm over the bumps in the city, a little bit like an unpleasant 911 around town. But it's got all your modern comforts. In the case of the Cabriolet here, it even has these nifty neck blowers that'll blow heat at the back of your neck if you're driving in cool temperatures. You've got this wind baffle here that is ugly, but significantly aids in cutting down wind buffeting and noise. That roof itself is rather graceful. It's a soft top, but with what feels like the integrity of a hard top. Give it a bonk, and it has a deep thud to it. It's overall a very firm panel. This isn't something that someone could just pass a knife through like the old days. You can even work it at speed, up to 50 kilometers an hour in this case. It's just handy in traffic, although of course if you are on the highway and you hit the rain, you are gonna have to slow down or pull off under an underpass. Seat ventilation can now be run at the same time as seat heating, which is also a nice refreshing change for those of us who don't necessarily like to feel swampy. And then there are the driving assists, and particularly the optional package, which has continued to improve and really makes highway driving quite a breeze. Driver fatigue is significantly reduced with this setting turned on. Lane keeping is steady and reliable. Follow distance is adaptive depending on radar input and can also be set to just automatically choose a distance based on your speed. And if you have that lane following turned on, a knock of the signal stalk can automatically execute a lane change for you when the car detects that it's safe. Along with those driving assists are, of course, BMW's long evolving iDrive infotainment systems. In the case of this car, we've got an optional head-up display, which is really nice with vibrant colors, bright projection, works through sunglasses, and has a variety of different modes depending on your drive settings. We've got wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. In the case of this unit, we have a wireless charger down here in the center, although when you're actually using CarPlay, you're really only going to hold a state of charge in most cases. You're not actually going to come out with much more juice than you started. Well, slick, however, this new system can be a little bit dense to live with. Tiling layers and layers and layers of icons can make it kind of tricky to find what you need. And even if you're well acquainted with the system as I've become, it's still kind of frustrating to get in and try to find some basic functions. At the very least, however, hard buttons and the rotary knob with touchpad do persist down here, and they properly interface if you're using Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. That means that if you're listening to Spotify on your phone and you hit the media button down here, it will bring up the phone projection and not the native radio pane as has been in the past. Now, it's important to note that this being a convertible does mean that you've got some compromise when it comes to cargo capacity. There in the boot, you do have a pretty sizable boot back there. But if you're going to be putting the top down, you are going to encroach on that. Now, BMW has done this properly, whereas a lot of other cars will simply block out that area altogether. This one shares it. There's a little flip down panel that you deploy and you can still access some space under it, deep enough actually to put 2 carry-on sized bags in beside each other with still space for more bags stood up on their side behind. If you choose to keep the top up, you can flip this partition up out of the way and you've got a full height, full depth capacity ready for whatever it is that you're going to be getting up to. Body motion is really well controlled. I've got this adaptive suspension just in soft comfort mode right now because I want to maximize my mechanical grip on this undulating and iffily maintained surface. I've got to say, carrying speed, particularly over some of the crests here, this is not quite Porsche level composed, but it still feels like it's managing its bit of lift a lot better than a lot of the earlier cars did. The addition of all-wheel drive in particular inspires a lot of confidence. BMW has properly kept it mostly rear biased, so if you really boot into it, especially in sport traction, it will start to dance a little bit, but that nose is always pulling itself straight. As long as you keep your eyes up and your hands follow, it's pretty reliable. Pricing. Well, obviously these cars aren't cheap, but the convertible here is especially not cheap. You're looking at high 90s for the coupe, but in the case of this here convertible, pricing starts from more than 110. This particular unit is just over 130 as equipped. Each of these can be configured with your choice of drive settings for power delivery, for transmission response, for brake aggression, for steering weight. So it's the modern era, cars have lots of stuff, they are allowed to be expensive. But does the 2024 M4 Cabrio actually feel like a $130,000 driving experience? If you're a track-going sort, yes, these cars can do a considerable amount, but particularly owing to that really dull, indeed downright dead steering, it isn't a car that I'd necessarily be in a hurry to take to the track, even over simpler, slower, less expensive cars. Yes, there are playful modes. You can do full rear bias. There's the drift mode and the drift optimizer, and it'll tell you how long you hung the tail out for and this and that. Especially with the all-wheel drive now, it'll really help you hold a slide even if you're a bit of a ham. But I just don't feel the magic. It's a great car, it's an impressive car, but it no longer feels particularly soulful. I lamented somewhat in last year's review of the BMW X5M that I believe that is now probably the truest and most earnest of the BMW M lineup. The X5M takes what it's got to work with and makes something that's actually surprisingly dynamic. I'm carrying speed through this rather enjoyable section of road here, and I am actually managing to make use of some of the gearing, something that I'm not able to do in Porsches because they're geared so tall and revved so high. So there are definitely points there. This powertrain, which honestly sits rather quietly when it's not under significant load, does come alive, and if you've got it in silly obnoxious mode, it does the crackle bangs, it does the theatrics, it does all of the things that, yes, you know it's just putting on for show, but still tickle you. But for $130,000, I want either significantly greater luxury or significantly greater sense of occasion. And yes, the M3, M4 have always just been gussied up 3 Series or 4 Series, but when they were just gussied up 3 Series or 4 Series, they weren't $130,000. Now, between the coupe and cab, definitely bear in mind that if you're one who takes passengers or has a significant other, a lot of people really enjoy being taken out in convertibles, like a lot. And now in this modern era, yes, there is still a weight penalty, but things have gotten so powerful that that's generally kind of irrelevant. And likewise, this isn't the 60s anymore. Convertibles are properly stiff. Manufacturers know how to build cars now. You're not realistically going to feel a big difference between the coupe or cab in this any more than you are in something like a Boxster versus Cayman, unless you are actually a very serious, exceptionally perceptive racing or development driver. You are just deluding yourself. So if you think dropping the top would be fun, and especially given that you can still access the full cargo size when you need it, I honestly think that if you can justify the price, the cab is a rather nice way to go. Credit where due, this here M4 has certainly maintained more of the proper M3 spirit, but much as the Porsche 911, which has grown so good that it's fallen antiseptic, this has gotten to be too much car and honestly probably too good for its own good. The ceiling is much higher here, but that means that you need a lot more road to be able to come anywhere close to it. And honestly, for that to be truly exciting, you've got to head several hours outside the city like we are now. For Driving.ca, I'm Al Alder. For more sports car news, reviews, previews, specs, tests, all the rest, be sure to follow us online on Driving.ca.